The whisper was not meant for my ears. It was a thread of sound, thin and sharp, meant to pass between my son, Michael, and his wife, Charlotte, in the manufactured chaos of my great-grandson's 5th birthday party. But I have always had good hearing. It is one of the few things age has not stolen from me. Just sign it, Michael. She's losing her mind anyway. I was standing by the dessert table, my hands clasped in front of my good navy dress. I had just set down the sweet potato pie I'd spent the morning making. The crust was perfect, fluted and golden. The filling was the exact color of a deep autumn sunset. It was my mother's recipe, and her mother's before that. A thread of our history baked with cinnamon and love. No one had touched it. It sat beside a store-bought cake with a cartoon character bleeding blue icing onto the plastic tablecloth. My son, my only child, made a sound. Not quite a laugh, but an exhale of air that sounded like agreement. Like surrender. A puff of sound that dismissed my entire existence. I did not turn. I did not gasp. I did not let my hands tremble. Not yet. I simply stared at my pie. It looked proud, out of place. A relic from another time. A testament to an effort no one had asked for. Much like me. For years I had been a presence in their lives but not a person. I was a function. A reliable babysitter on short notice. A source of a last-minute loan that was never quite paid back. A keeper of holiday traditions they found quaint but inconvenient. I was the sturdy, old armchair in the corner of a modern room, useful to throw a coat over but rarely to sit in. The slights had been small, accumulating like dust on fine furniture. My opinion asked for and then ignored. My calls returned days later with a hurried excuse. The Christmas they told me not to bring food because, as Charlotte put it, the kids just don't eat old-fashioned stuff. I brought a pie anyway that year too. It also sat untouched. But this was different. This was not dust. This was a crack in the foundation. She's losing her mind anyway, the words echoed in the space behind my eyes. They were talking about the papers. The papers Michael had been trying to get me to sign for weeks. He'd called it simplifying things, power of attorney. Giving him control of my finances, my property. My house. The house my husband, James, and I had bought with 50 years of hard work. The house where I could still smell his pipe tobacco in the study on a damp evening. It's just to make it easier for you, Mama, Michael had said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. So you don't have to worry about bills and things. I had worried about bills my whole life. Worrying about bills was what kept the lights on. Now I understood. It was not about making my life easier. It was about making their life easier. They saw my mind not as a place of memories and wisdom, of recipes and prayers, but as a failing asset. A liability that needed to be managed before it caused a problem. I stood there for another minute, maybe two. I watched my great-grandson smear blue icing on his face. I watched Charlotte take a picture of him with her phone, her smile wide and false. I watched my son, my Michael, watch his wife, a look of weary affection on his face. They were a perfect little family, a picture in a frame. And I was standing outside the frame looking in. I turned, my movements slow and deliberate. I picked up my purse from the chair where I'd left it. I did not say goodbye. A ghost does not need to announce its departure. I walked through their pristine house, with its gray walls and furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. My sensible shoes made no sound on their plush carpets. At the door I paused. I looked back. No one had noticed I was leaving. The party continued. A symphony of happy noise that felt like a scream. The drive home was quiet. The old car, James's last gift to me, hummed along the familiar streets. I kept my eyes on the road. My hands were steady on the wheel. The trembling was inside now, a deep cold shudder. It was not fear. It was the beginning of a great and terrible calm. When I got home, the silence was a physical thing. Pressed in on me. The house smelled of lemon polish and old books. The grandfather clock in the hall, a wedding gift from my parents, ticked a steady rhythm. Tick, tock. The sound of my life moving forward 1 second at a time. I did not turn on the television. I did not pick up my knitting. I went into the kitchen. The linoleum was cool under my feet. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove. The whistle of a kettle is a lonely sound, but it is a sound of purpose. While the water heated, I stood at the window, looking out at my small backyard. My gardenias were blooming. Their scent, sweet and heavy, drifted through the screen. James had planted those bushes for me the year Michael was born. He said they were for grace. I had tried to live a life of grace. I had raised my son in the church. I had taught him to be kind, to be respectful. I had endured Charlotte's casual cruelties with a patient smile because she was the wife of my son, the mother of my grandchildren. I had believed that was my role. To endure. To be the quiet, steady center that held them all together, even if it meant being worn away in the process. The kettle screamed. I poured the boiling water over a bag of black tea in my favorite mug, the one with the small chip on the rim that I always turned to the back. I added a slice of lemon and a spoonful of honey. The ritual was automatic, my hands moving with a memory of their own. I carried the tea into the living room and sat in the worn velvet armchair by the window. The fabric was soft and familiar against my skin. The ticking of the clock seemed louder now. Tick, tock. A decision. A reckoning. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. I saw an old woman. My hair, a crown of silver, was neatly pinned. My face was a map of my 78 years, etched with lines of laughter and worry and loss. But my eyes were clear. They were not the eyes of a woman who was losing her mind. They were the eyes of a woman who had just found it. The hurt was still there, a dull ache behind my ribs. But something else was rising through it. A feeling I hadn't felt in a very long time. It was not anger. Anger is a hot, messy thing. This was cold. It was clean. It was clarity. Charlotte's words were a gift. A cruel gift wrapped in scorn, but a gift nonetheless. She had given me the truth. She had shown me exactly how I was seen. An inconvenience. Problem to be managed. An old woman whose mind was failing. And Michael, my son. His silence was the real betrayal. His soft, easy agreement. In that moment, he had chosen his wife's convenience over his mother's dignity. I took a sip of my tea. It was hot and sweet, and it warmed me from the inside out. I sat in that chair for a long time, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows and the shadows grew long in the room. The clock ticked on. I did not cry. The time for tears was over. The time for enduring was over. The world saw me as a quiet, accommodating old black woman. A matriarch whose only remaining purpose was to serve. They had mistaken my patience for passivity, my silence for weakness, my love for a resource to be endlessly tapped. They were about to learn the difference. My first call was on Monday morning. I did not call Michael to ask him why. I did not call Charlotte to confront her. Their opinions were no longer relevant to my life. I found the number in my old address book, the one with the cracked leather cover. The handwriting was faded but still clear. Mr. Franklin. A young man from the church, a lawyer now. His mother, rest her soul, had sung in the choir with me for 30 years. He had helped me with the paperwork when James passed. He was sharp and, more importantly, he was kind. He saw me as Elara Howard, not just Michael's mother. His secretary put me right through. Mr. Franklin, I said, my voice steady. This is Elara Howard. I need to make an appointment. I have some business to discuss. Of course, Mother Howard, he said, his voice warm and respectful. Is everything all right? Everything, I said, and the word felt truer than it had in years. Is about to be. The lawyer's office was in a tall building downtown. It smelled sterile of clean paper and faint coffee. It was a world away from my house, with its scent of cinnamon and lemon polish. Mr. Franklin was a good man. He wore a crisp suit, but his eyes were gentle. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer platitudes or tell me I was overreacting. He just listened as I laid out the situation. I did not tell him about the whisper. I did not need to air my family's dirty laundry. I simply stated my intentions. I see, he said when I was finished. He steepled his fingers, his expression serious. You wish to revoke the current power of attorney you have on file, which names your son Michael Howard. That is correct, I said. And you wish to draw up a new one? No, I said. I do not. I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. If that changes, I will address it at that time. For now, I will be my own power. He nodded slowly, a small, approving smile touching his lips. Understood. And your will? You want to make some changes? I want to make a new one, I said. The old one is to be nullified. The old will left everything to Michael. The house, my savings, James's pension. It was what one did. It was expected. But expectations had changed. We spent 2 hours going over the details. I was methodical. I was clear. I felt a sense of focus I had not felt since I managed the accounts for our church's building fund 20 years ago. My mind was not failing. My mind was a well-oiled machine, humming with purpose. I left his office with a list. A series of steps. A plan. The next stop was the bank. The one I had been using for 50 years. The manager, a young woman named Ms. Albright, knew me by name. She always asked about my grandchildren. Today our conversation was different. I need to remove a name from my checking and savings accounts, I told her, sliding my driver's license and the notarized letter from Mr. Franklin across the cool, smooth counter. Her professional smile faltered for a moment. She looked at the paper, then at me. Mr. Michael Howard? She asked, her voice hushed. Yes, I said. Effective immediately, she did not ask why. She simply typed into her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The air was filled with the quiet clicks. With each click I felt a chain loosening. She printed new signature cards. I signed them. My penmanship was firm and steady, the signature of a woman in full command of her faculties. I also rented a safe deposit box, a small one, for my new will, my new documents. A place of my own under my own name, accessible only by me. When I walked out of the bank, the city air felt different, fresher. The hum of the traffic sounded like a song. I had taken the first steps. I had started building a wall. Not a wall to keep the world out, but a wall to keep myself in. To protect the woman I was finally reclaiming. That evening I began a different kind of work. The work of the heart. I went into the living room and stood before the mantelpiece. It was crowded with photographs in silver frames. Michael's graduation. Michael and Charlotte's wedding. My grandchildren Imani and Leo at various ages. A gallery of a happy family. I picked them up one by one. I polished the glass with a soft cloth. I looked at each smiling face. I remembered the day the picture was taken. The feel of the sun, the sound of their laughter. There was love there. I knew that. But the love had been curdled by neglect, poisoned by disrespect. I did not smash the frames. I did not tear the pictures. That would have been an act of anger. This was an act of preservation, of my own sanity. I found an old hat box in the back of my closet. It was lined with faded floral paper. I wrapped each picture in tissue paper and laid it gently inside. The wedding photo. The family portrait from last Easter. I closed the lid. The mantelpiece looked bare now. Stuck. But also clean. It was a blank space waiting for something new. Next I went to the guest room. The room Michael and his family used when they stayed over, which was rare these days. It was always kept ready for them. Fresh sheets on the bed. Fluffy towels in the bathroom. A small basket of toiletries Charlotte liked. I stripped the bed. The sheets smelled faintly of dust and lavender. I folded them and put them away in the linen closet. I took the basket of toiletries and emptied it into a donation bag. I packed away the extra pillows and the heavy quilt my grandmother had made. The one I only put out for them. I was reclaiming my house. Not just the legal deed, but the space itself. Every room would be mine again. Not a waiting room for visitors who no longer saw me. The last thing I did that night was in my own bedroom. I have a small writing desk by the window. In the top drawer I kept a box of stationery. And in that box I kept a list. It was a list of gifts I had been buying for the grandchildren for their upcoming birthdays and for Christmas. A doll for Imani. A science kit for Leo. I took out the list. I had been so proud of finding the exact things they wanted. I read it over one last time. Then I took my pen and drew a single clean line through all of it. It took 3 days for them to notice. My phone rang on Wednesday afternoon. The screen lit up with Michael's name. I looked at it. I watched it ring, the sound shrill in the quiet house. I remembered all the times I had waited for his call, my heart leaping with hope every time the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message appeared. I listened to it, my hand resting on the cool kitchen counter. "Hey Mama. It's me. Just calling to check in. We haven't heard from you since the party. Give me a call back." By his voice was casual. No concern. Just a check-in. A box being ticked on his to-do list. I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. The silence that followed felt like a victory. 2 hours later he called again. I let it ring. The voicemail this time was a little different. "Mama, seriously, call me back. Charlotte's wondering if you're mad about something. You know how she gets. Just let us know you're okay mad about something." As if my feelings were a passing storm, a childish tantrum, not a fundamental shift in the tectonic plates of my soul. He was already blaming Charlotte. Already deflecting. I deleted it. The text started that evening. First from Michael. "Mom, call me then. Are you getting my messages?" Then one from Charlotte. "Elara, Michael is very worried. Please let us know you are safe." Her use of my first name was a deliberate choice. A way of reminding me of my place. Not mother. Not grandma. Elara. An equal, but one she felt superior to. I blocked her number. The little notification that confirmed the block was deeply satisfying. A digital door slammed shut. The next day, the calls were more frequent. The voicemails took on a new tone. Annoyance was creeping in. "All right, Mama, this isn't funny anymore," Michael's voice said, the forced patience wearing thin. "I'm trying to pay your insurance bill online, and my login isn't working. Says I don't have access. Did you change something? Call me. This is important." The money. Of course. Their concern was not for my well-being, but for the disruption to their convenience. I had been a utility, and the power had just been shut off. I deleted the message. I spent the day in my garden. I pulled weeds. I watered my gardenias. I pruned the rose bushes James had loved so much. The sun was warm on my back. The soil was cool and damp in my hands. It was real work. Honest work. It grounded me. The phone kept ringing inside, a distant, frantic sound. I ignored it. I was tending to my own roots. On Friday, the escalation came. A long, rambling voicemail from Michael. His voice was a mixture of anger and a strange, whining panic. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Mama, but it needs to stop. I went to the bank to transfer money for your property taxes, and they told me I'm not on the account anymore. They wouldn't tell me anything. Do you know how embarrassing that was? What is wrong with you? Are you sick? Did someone talk you into this? People will take advantage of you. You need me to protect you. This is exactly why I needed power of attorney. You're not thinking clearly. Call me back." Now, I listened to the whole thing, my face impassive. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He said, "What is wrong with you?" He didn't say, "I want to help," he said, "You need me to protect you." He saw my independence not as strength, but as a symptom of incompetence. My clear, deliberate actions as proof that I was, in fact, losing my mind. The irony was so bitter, it almost made me laugh. I deleted the message. And then I blocked his number too. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a clean, empty space. My space. I had built my wall and it was holding strong. I felt no guilt. I felt no regret. I felt a profound and steady peace. I was no longer waiting for their calls. I was no longer hoping for their attention. I was free. For a week there was nothing. A blessed, quiet week. I read 3 books. I baked a loaf of bread just for myself, and ate it warm with butter. I listened to the gospel music station on the radio every morning, and the sound filled my house with joy. I felt like I was breathing air from a different planet. I knew it was just a lull, a regrouping. They were deciding on their next move. I was not worried. I was prepared. The call that finally broke the silence came from a number I did not recognize. But I knew who it would be. I answered on the third ring. Grandma. The voice was hesitant. Young. It was my granddaughter, Imani. Hello, Imani, I said, my voice calm. Grandma, are you okay? She asked. There was real concern in her voice. Not the manufactured worry of her parents. I am very well, child. Thank you for asking. There was a pause. I could hear her take a deep breath. They're going crazy. Dad and Mom. They're saying all this stuff. That you've lost it. That you're not safe. And what do you think? I asked gently. Another pause. Longer this time. I think you have a right to be angry, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Grandma, I heard what Mom said. At the party. About, I was coming to get a slice of your pie. And I heard her. And I saw Dad. He didn't say anything to stop her. My hand tightened on the receiver. Validation. It was a balm on a wound I didn't even know was still open. I'm so sorry, Grandma, she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to say. I should have said something. There was nothing for you to say, Imani, I told her, my own voice thick with an emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel. This is not your fight. But I love you, she said, and the words were so simple, so pure. I miss you. Can I come see you? Just me. Here was the test. My wall was built to keep out the disrespect, the neglect. Was there a gate in it? A gate for love? Yes, child, I said, and a real smile touched my lips for the first time in days. I would like that very much. Imani came the next afternoon. She brought me a small bouquet of daisies, clumsy and sweet. She looked so much like my mother with her wide, intelligent eyes. We sat in the kitchen. I made us tea. I had baked a small batch of cookies. She ate 3 of them. She told me about school, about a boy she liked, about a book she was reading. She did not mention her parents. She did not ask me any questions about what I was doing. She just talked to me. Like I was a person. Like my thoughts and my life mattered. When it was time for her to go, she hugged me tightly at the door. Your pie is the best, Grandma, she said into my shoulder. Don't ever stop making it. I won't, I promised. But from now on, I'm only making it for people who appreciate it. Her visit solidified my resolve. My actions were not about punishing my son. They were about protecting my legacy. A legacy of strength and dignity that I wanted to pass on to Imani. I was not just closing a door on a painful past. I was opening a window to a different kind of future. The next phase of my plan was the hardest. It was time to deal with the house. This house was more than wood and brick. It was the container for my entire adult life. I could walk through these rooms blindfolded and tell you the story of every scuff on the floor, every chip in the paint. James and I had burned the mortgage in the fireplace on our 25th anniversary. I had brought Michael home from the hospital to his nursery upstairs. I had nursed James in our bedroom through his final illness. The memories were everywhere. They were baked into the walls. But the house was also a burden. 4 bedrooms for one old woman. A big yard to maintain. And it was an asset. The main asset my son and his wife were counting on. It was their inheritance, their future. The one they were so eager to control. I called a realtor. A woman from my church named Ally. She was a widow like me. A no-nonsense woman with a kind smile. She came over the next day. She walked through the house, her eyes taking in everything. It's a beautiful home, Elara, she said, standing in the living room, now empty of its family photos. Lots of good memories here, I'm sure. And some I'm ready to leave behind, I said. She just nodded. She understood. She didn't press. She gave me a frank assessment of what the house was worth in the current market. The number was substantial. More than I had expected. It was a lifetime of equity. A lifetime of work. Are you sure this is what you want? She asked gently, her hand on my arm. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. The for sale sign went up in the front yard 2 days later. It was a bold, declarative statement, an act of war in their eyes. It took less than 4 hours for the siege to begin. A car screeched to a halt in front of my house. I was in the living room reading. I looked out the window. It was Michael's expensive SUV. He and Charlotte got out. They looked at the sign, then at the house, their faces a mask of disbelief and fury. They marched up the walkway and began pounding on my front door. Not ringing the bell. Pounding. As if they had the right to break it down. I took a deep breath. I placed my bookmark carefully in my novel. I stood up and smoothed down my dress. My heart was beating a steady, calm rhythm. I was not afraid. I opened the door. They stood there, chests heaving. Michael's face was red. Charlotte's was pale with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" Michael demanded, pointing a trembling finger at the sign. "Are you out of your mind? Selling our house. Our house." The word hung in the air between us. "This is my house, Michael," I said, my voice even. "And I have decided to sell it." "You can't," Charlotte shrieked, pushing past Michael. "This is our children's inheritance. This is our future. You have no right." "I have every right," I said, looking directly at her. My gaze did not waver. "It is my name on the deed. It was my husband and I who worked to pay for it. Not you." "Mama, listen to me," Michael said, trying a different tactic, his voice dropping into a tone of strained reason. "You're not well. You're being impulsive. You need to let us help you. We need to get you to a doctor. We can get this all sorted out." A doctor. A competency test. That was their next move. I had been expecting it. Mr. Franklin had warned me. "There is nothing to sort out," I said. And then I gave them the gift they had given me. The gift of clarity. "I was at the party, Charlotte," I said, my voice still quiet, but carrying the weight of a final judgment. "I was standing by the dessert table. I heard what you said to Michael." Her face went from pale to chalk white. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. I turned my eyes to my son. "And I heard you, Michael. I heard you laugh." He flinched as if I had struck him. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. In that moment of shame, I saw the little boy I had raised. But he was gone. A man stood in his place. A man who had made his choice. "You thought my mind was failing," I continued, my voice as cold and clean as a winter morning. "You wanted to take control of everything because you believed I was incompetent. You whispered about it behind my back. Well, my mind is clearer than it has ever been. I am simply acting on the information you gave me. You showed me my place in your life. I am now showing you your place in mine." They were speechless. There was nothing to say. I had spoken the truth, plain and unadorned. "This conversation is over," I said. And then I did something I had never done to my child in his entire life. I closed the door in his face. I did not slam it. I closed it gently, firmly. The click of the latch was the most definitive sound I had ever heard. I leaned my back against the door, my eyes closed. I could hear them outside, their voices rising and falling. Arguing. Accusing. But they were outside. And I was inside. Safe. The house sold in a week. There was a bidding war. I accepted an offer that was well over the asking price. The closing was scheduled for 30 days. 30 days to dismantle a life and build a new one. I started packing. It was a slow, deliberate process. Each object I touched brought a flood of memories. I sorted them into 3 piles. Keep, donate, discard. The things I kept were small. My husband's favorite armchair. The family Bible, with its pages of births and deaths recorded in my mother's elegant script. The quilt my grandmother made. A box of letters James had written to me when he was in the army. My cast iron skillet, seasoned with 60 years of meals. I was not keeping furniture. I was keeping stories. The rest I let go. The formal dining set we used only on holidays. The guest room furniture. Michael's old childhood bedroom set. I called a charity that helped families who had lost their homes in fires. They came with a big truck and took it all. I watched them carry away the physical weight of my past. The house felt lighter, more open. During this time, I made my final visit to Mr. Franklin. We finalized my new will. The house, my savings, my investments. Everything I had. It was all placed into a trust. And the beneficiary? He asked, his pen poised over the document. My granddaughter Imani Howard, I said, to be used for her education and her future. But she is not to have access to the principal until she is 30 years old. I want her to make her own way first, to know the value of her own work. And your son? Mr. Franklin asked carefully. Michael is to receive $1, I said. To show he was not forgotten, but deliberately disinherited. It was a harsh clause. A lawyer's clause. But it was necessary. It was a final, undeniable statement. I also made a provision for a substantial donation. A gift to the women's shelter my church supported. A place for women who needed a safe harbor. A place to start over. I knew something about that now. I signed the documents. My hand did not shake. This was not an act of vengeance. It was an act of justice. It was an act of love redirected to where it would be valued. I found a new place to live. A small 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet complex for seniors. It had a porch big enough for a chair and a few pots. For my gardenias. It was clean and bright and it was all mine. The day of the move was long and tiring. Imani came to help. She did not ask questions. She just wrapped my delicate teacups in newspaper and labeled boxes with a thick black marker. Her presence was a quiet comfort. As the movers loaded the last box onto the truck, I took one final walk through the empty house. The rooms echoed. The floors were bare. Sunlight streamed through the clean windows. It was no longer my home. It was just a house waiting for a new family, a new story. I did not feel sad. I felt a sense of completion. I had closed a chapter. I locked the front door for the last time and dropped the keys into my purse. My new life began. It was a quiet life. A simple life. My days found a new rhythm. I woke with the sun. I drank my tea on my new porch, listening to the morning birds. I planted my gardenias in big ceramic pots. I joined a book club at the church. I started volunteering at the library twice a week, reading stories to children. I was no longer Elara Howard, the mother, the grandmother, the widow. I was just Elara, a woman with her own time, her own interests, her own life. I was not lonely. I was peacefully alone. I made friends at my new building. Other women with stories of their own. We played cards on Thursday nights. We went to the early bird dinner specials. We talked. We laughed. We saw each other. One afternoon a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. It was from Michael. My hands did not tremble as I held it. I looked at it for a long moment. I could feel the weight of his words through the thin paper. Words of anger? Of apology? Of desperation? I did not know. And I realized with a startling sense of peace that it did not matter. I placed the unopened letter on my kitchen counter. Maybe I would read it tomorrow. Maybe next week. Maybe never. His words no longer had power over me. His validation was no longer something I needed. I had found my own. I went out to my porch and sat in my chair. The sun was warm on my face. My gardenias were beginning to bud. The air smelled of sweet earth and new beginnings. For 78 years I had lived my life for other people. I had poured myself out like tea from a pot until I was empty. But my cup was full now. I had filled it myself. They thought I was losing my mind. But in the end it was not my mind I was losing. It was my chains. And in that silence, in that space I had carved out for myself, I had not lost a family. I had found myself. And she was more than enough.